Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is Carmina, astrologer and reader with the cards of truth. And today I wanted to talk to you guys about a special technique that is really not complicated at all, and it's very, very insightful. We can use this technique for additional information when we do rectification, when we do predictions with transits, but mainly, most of all, this technique is very useful to understand how logically astrology works. So this technique is called Bhavat Bhavam, and it can be translated roughly as from the house like the house, because in Vedic astrology, bhavas are equivalent to the houses. But let me remind you that in Vedic astrology, one bhava is one full sign. So the first bhava will be the ascendant sign, the second bhava the sign after that, the third bhava the sign after that, and so on. So we're not talking about cusps here, we're talking about full signs. So if the ascendant is Scorpio, for instance, the fourth bhava from that will be the fourth sign from the ascendant, so Aquarius. And when we count the bhavas, we always take the first bhava as number one. So we don't count from the second, we always count from that bhava. For instance, when we say the second from the second bhava, we take the second bhava as one, so it's 1, 2. So the third bhava from the ascendant will be the second bhava from the second bhava. So the third bhava from the Scorpio ascendant is Capricorn, and the second bhava for a Scorpion ascendant, the second from the second, will also be Capricorn, because we count from Sagittarius. Sagittarius is 1 and Capricorn is 2. It's not so difficult. I'm going to share my screen soon so that you will follow along with me. But I really like this Bhavat Bhavam, from the house like the house, because how this technique works actually. Well, you count from the bhava, so from the respective bhava is counted from the ascendant sign. You count an equal amount and you arrive at another bhava that is also has a similar meaning or a supporting meaning as the initial bhava. So for instance, the first from the first is also the first. So if we count 1 from the ascendant, we get 1, which can translate into, you know, that the first, which is the self, the ascendant is the self, right? So it's the self path, the self body. So that's the most important. You always arrive at yourself when you count from the self. So that's what I'm talking about. This is very, esoterically interesting and numerologically. And also, if you're not really into astrology, but you're into the cards of truth, maybe you'll get more insight in what the houses are like, because in the cards of truth software, we get the house cusps. So let me tell you how this works. Let me share my screen, 1 second. Okay, so this is a round wheel chart, so that we don't, scare off the people that are into Western astrology, because this Bhavat Bhavam principle, it's a great way to introduce yourself to Vedic principles of astrology if you're a Western-oriented astrologer. So here we see the ascendant is Scorpio. So the first from the first is the first, like I said before. What else can we say about this? Yes, so again, I wanted to mention that this technique is very important for predicting events, the Bhavat Bhavam, because, for instance, if we look for childbirth, to predict childbirth, we will examine the fifth bhava, which is the natural bhava related to children, but then we will also examine the fifth from the fifth, which is the ninth. So you can see how important it is. And also for looking, if we're looking at relationship events, we look at the seventh, which naturally relates to relationships, but we also look at the seventh from the seven, which is the first. So, and also, you know, in the seventh divisional chart, in the seventh Varga, the key bhavas are the first and the seventh, for that exact same reason, because Bhavat Bhavam gives an additional insight into the meanings of the houses, and houses that, you know, the Bhavam house has additionally a secondary meaning to the originating house. And yes, so let me just go through all the Bhavat Bhavam houses first, and then I will explain to you how we can take a journey into this, you know, into this from the house, like the house, and understand it logically. So counting one from the first bhava is the first bhava. So the result is the same. The first counting one is the first. The second bhava, if we count two, we arrive at the third bhava. The third bhava, if we count three, we arrive at the fifth bhava. The fourth bhava, if we count four, we arrive at the seventh bhava. The fifth bhava, if we count five, we arrive at the nine. We already said in the example with children. The sixth bhava, if we count six, we get the 11th. The seventh, if we count seven, we get the first. Again, the example we gave. The eighth bhava, counting eight, is the third. The ninth bhava, counting nine, is the fifth. And the 10th bhava, counting 10, is the seventh. The 11th bhava, counting 11, is the ninth. And the 12th bhava, counting 12, is the 11th. So again, a bhava is the rough equivalent of what Western astrology calls signs, but it's a full sign, it's not the cusp. So the full sign after the ascendant. When I say the 12th bhava, I mean the 12th sign after the ascendant. So as I was saying, it's interesting to take this journey throughout the zodiac using the Bhavat Bhavam principles. Counting one from the first arrives at one. So the person is being themselves, is always expressing their truth as their personal path, which is the ascendant, the first bhava. Then we go to the second bhava. So if we have resources, which is the second bhava, because the second relates to wealth, it relates to family or friends that are supporting us. So if we have the resources in the second, then we can go to the third. We can learn something practical, something technical. We can sharpen our skills at the third. And then after we sharpen the concrete skills at the third, if we add 3 to the third, the Bhavat Bhavam is the fifth. So you become creative after sharpening the skills, because the 3 from the 3 is 5. And then what is the fourth? The fourth is emotional peace. So if we count 4 from the fourth, we get to the seventh. So if you have emotional peace within your heart, which is the fourth house because it relates to the sign of Cancer, to emotional stability, if you have that, then you can relate to other people, which is the seventh. Or the fourth can also mean vehicles. So if you have access to vehicles, then you can travel to foreign places, because the seventh is traveling to foreign places. So let me just quickly show you here. So the fourth here from Scorpio is Aquarius. So this would be vehicles. And if we count here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, we count 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We get to Taurus, which is the 7th. So the fourth from the fourth is the 7th. So if we have the vehicle, we can travel long distances, because the 7th, besides being partners, is also long distance travel, foreign travel, because it's the point that is furthest from your path, from the first house. It's the opposite side, so it's, you know, journey to distant places. Okay, so we were at the fourth. Just 1 second here, let me plug my laptop. Okay, so we did the first 4 bhavas, now we're at the 5th. Now let's see if we count 5 from the sign of Pisces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We get to the 9th. And that's very interesting, because the 5th traditionally relates to children. And the 9th cusp doesn't traditionally relate to children, but it's a secondary, as we were saying, house and house lord that we look at when predicting childbirth. And let's see what the 5th means. The 5th means yantras, mantras. Yantra means amulet that helps one focus during meditation. Mantras, of course, are the special hymns and the special sounds or groups or words that help us focus for meditation. So the 5th has a spiritual connotation already. So if we do these mantras and yantras, we get to the 9th, and the 9th is related to pilgrimage. It's related to religion and spirituality. So we can see how these two are connected. The 5th from the 5th is the 9th. And at the same time, the 5th is related to children. And the 9th as the 5th from the 5th can show that your children can be your teacher as well, because the 9th also relates to teachers. And let's see, the 5th is a so-called trine house, and the 9th is also a trine. So these are the two trines that are interchanged in the zodiac, because if we count 9 from the 9, we arrive at the 5th, and if we count 5 from the 5th, we arrive at the 9th. So we can see this interchange between the trines. And these trines are very connected to the energy of Jupiter, because Jupiter is the only graha. If we know this graha drishti technique, it's the only graha that fully aspects the trines from itself. So the Jupiterian energy is connected to the trine energy, which is a very harmonious interchange. And the Jupiter is, of course, connected to children, and it's connected to a spiritual journey. So it's connected to both the 5th and the 9th cusp, and also the 5th as children, you know, it's like an innocent joy, and the 9th is a more mature wisdom. So it's really fun to see the interplay between these houses. It's fun and geeky if you are that way inclined. Okay, and also it's important to say that the 9th relates to grandparents. So having children eventually will make you a grandparent at the 9th. Okay, now let's see the next one, the 6th. So this is the 6th from the ascendant. In Scorpio ascendant case, it's Aries. So if we count 6 from the 6th, let's see what we get. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We get to the natural, 11th. So the 6th from the 6th is the 11th house. Normally, the 6th house is related to obstacles, to harm to one's body, to enemies. So if we work hard and if we overcome obstacles, if we manage to heal our bodies, because the sixth sign is related to health issues, then we get to the 11th, which is psychological health. It's also material rewards, gains, titles. So hard work, which the 6th and the 11th are both upachaya houses. So they're houses that manifest after long and tedious effort. So it's interesting to see this link between them. If you do the hard work, if you intelligently solve problems, if you battle your enemies, you eventually will get some gains and some social recognition, which is the 11th. So the 11th house also has a secondary 6th house connotation. If you want to look, for instance, in the chart for enemies, you can look at the 11th as a secondary karaka for enemies, the 11th lord. Okay, now we're going to the 7th. As we spoiled earlier, the 7th from the 7th is the 1st. So let's count to make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So counting 7 from the 7, we get to the person. That very beautifully shows that, we are in relationships with other people, which is, the 7th, just to find ourselves, to find out who we are, to find out what our path is. And 7th, as I was saying, is also indicator of foreign travel. So we travel to distant places to find our own path eventually. I mean, everything the other relates to us. It's interesting that the 7th is also a Maraka house. So it's a killer house, because foreign places, like foreign travel, is usually stressing, and relationships are also stressing with other people. That's why the 2nd and the 7th are Maraka houses. The 2nd is representing your close family, your close friend, your close environment. So if anything happens to your close family or your partner, that's gonna cause stress to the person, and it's gonna, shorten their lives, or at least give them some gray hair. Okay, so it's interesting. So you travel to distant places to find yourself, because the 7th from the 7th is the 1st. You go into relationships to find out more about yourself, because the 7th from the 7th is the 1st. Okay, let's move on to the 8th house. The 8th house is associated, it's called the flaw bhava, it's associated with our vulnerabilities, it's associated with our psychological issues, it's our fears, it's our addictive, compulsive tendencies, but it's also our partner's resources or the public money. That's why the 8th always relates to lottery as well. So the 8th house is fighting the inner battles. So if we count the 8 from the 8th, what do we get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We get the 3rd. So fighting the inner battles here leads to courage, which is also the 3rd. Getting inheritances leads to competition with siblings, which is also the 3rd, because the 8th relates to inheritances, and the 8th from the 8th is the 3rd, which is siblings, and also competitiveness for resources with your neighbors, with everyone in your close environment. So isn't that interesting? Okay, now we're at the 9th. We already discussed a little about the 9th. So if we count 9 from the 9, we get to the 5th. So when we, the 9th is all about a more advanced spiritual practice. It's about journeys, distant journeys, mostly pilgrimage. It's about your teachers. So the receiving, we can say that receiving the blessings of your teachers at the ninth, because yesterday was Guru Purnima. It was the day where in India they celebrate gurus, teachers. So receiving the blessings from your teachers in the ninth then leads to being creative in the fifth. Okay, so continuing our journey, we have the 10th, which is the great deeds. It's the karma bhava. It's the house of action. Is where we, this is what we do, and this is how we are seen in the world, what we are judged by in the world by other people. So let's see what happens when we count 10 from the 10th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What do you know? We get to the 7th. So if we do the great deeds, if we do the work at the 10th, because the 10th is also an upachaya house, it's a house of hard work that manifests with some difficulty, that will help strengthen our relationship to the world in general and to our partner in particular, which is the 7th. So it's interesting because before we were saying that the 4th from the 4th is the 7th and the 10th from the 10th is the 7th. So the results of these opposite houses, the 4th also is the mother and the 10th is the father. It's interesting because, how we relate to the world is very much based on how we relate to our parents. So the 4th from the 4th, the key bhava from the mother is the 7th. The key bhava from the father is the 7th. So this is, what we know from psychology one-on-one. Our parents are the first people that we relate to in the world, and our relationship with them will influence the way we see the world as an adult. So it's very interesting how the Bhavat Bhavam also shows this. Okay, now let's go to the 11th. The 11th is, as we mentioned before, an upachaya house. So it's a house of, that gives results after a lot of effort and after a long time. And the 11th from the 11th is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 is the 9th. It's interesting because if we check Bhavat Bhavam, all the Dharma houses lead to Dharma. The Dharma houses are the houses that represent ourselves and pursuing our path. And the Dharma houses are the 1st, the 5th, and the 9th. So the 1st leads to the 1st, and the 5th and the 9th lead to each other. So Dharma leads to Dharma. And the Kama houses also lead to Dharma. That's very interesting because the 11th house is a Kama house and it leads to the 9th. So the 7th house is a Kama house and it leads to the 1st, which is a Dharma house. So it's very interesting how that happens. Also, the 3rd is a Kama house and it leads to the 5th. So Kama, which is desire, like our desires eventually lead us to pursuing our Dharma. So by integrating socially into groups and being humanitarian, sharing what we have of value to the world, that happens in the 11th place, then we get to develop higher ideals, which happens at the the ninth house. If we have a lot of money, if we gain a lot of money in the 11th, then we can afford to go on a pilgrimage, which is the ninth. And people look up to us. We are like a guru figure, because, you know, people who gain a lot of money, who, you know, are influential in groups, are also considered, you know, like teacher figures. So it's very interesting how that correlates. Okay, so let's see the last one, the 12th. If we count 12, I'm gonna just count backwards. So this is the 12th from the 12th, which is also the 11th. So the 12th house relates to isolated places, it relates to distant places, it relates to ashram, it relates to liberation, but also long-term investments. So, you know, if we do long-term investments, like right long-term investments, then we get to the 11th, which is gains. And we can also say on a broader level that the true reward, which is the 11th house, the house of rewards, the true reward is, you know, only comes after giving everything up in the 12th, because the 12th is usually considered the house of loss, of expenses. For instance, when you buy a car, the 12th house has to be activated as well, or the 12th lord, because buying a car is also a great expense. So you're losing money to gain something. That's the principle. The 12th from the 12th is the 11th. So by spending money, you gain money. By letting go of everything, we gain liberation, hopefully. So the greatest gain comes after giving everything up. But first you have to have something to give up, and then you can give it up. Not give up something you don't have. Like people who say, okay, I'm gonna be, you know, I'm gonna dedicate my life to God because they can't have relationships or they can't fit in. The true sacrifice is having something and being able to give it up. That's the one sacrifice that, you know, is appreciated. So I was also saying, you know, the angles always lead to the angles, and that emphasizes the importance of angles. So the first bhava leads to the first, the seventh leads to the first, the 10th leads to the seventh, and the fourth leads to the seventh. So action generates action. Angles are action houses, and that's why they're considered the most powerful houses: the first, the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th. And we also notice after doing these calculations that the bhavam is never the second, the fourth, the sixth, the eighth, the 10th, and the 12th. So never the result, the house that we arrive at, it will never be an artha or a moksha house. It will always be a kama or a dharma house. So it's very interesting to take that into consideration, because artha is the material concerns, moksha is, you know, giving up things, contemplation. But the results will never be that in Bhavat Bhavam. So because the artha and the moksha houses lead to kama, and the kama houses lead to dharma, we can surmise that in the end, you know, everything comes down to dharma, and dharma itself cannot arrive at anything else than dharma, because all the dharma, bhava, secondary agenda of interest is also dharma. Yes, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. This to me was very interesting. I have given this a lot of thought while writing this Fundamentals of Vedic Astrology book together with my colleague. We had some very interesting insights, and yeah, it's been such a learning experience, like us trying to teach other people about astrology, taught us and made us have a lot of realizations and insights. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments, what is your favorite Bhavat Bhavam house? I think my favorite is, you know, the first, leading to the first, because you lead to yourself. You can't go anywhere than yourself. You can't escape yourself. You are born with yourself. You die with yourself. So in the end, all the roads lead to yourself. Yes, don't forget to check out my website, yourstaralign.com. I have their reading services that I offer. They range from manual card cast to cards of truth system with the software readings, and also astrology full reading. So yes, check it out, and also check out the classes I offer. There are recordings of past classes and also info about future classes that I will teach, sometimes by myself, sometimes with a colleague. Okay, so thanks for watching. If you watched till the end, good for you. See you again soon. Bye.